Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, is a glorious statement. Yet, we make a profound mistake when we limit it to merely an environmental idea. It is so much more. It is our response to the great dangers of both individualism and oppression. It is our solution to the seeming conflict between the individual and the group. Our seventh principle may be our Unitarian Universalist way of coming to fully embrace something greater than ourselves. The interdependent web, expressed as the spirit of life, the ground of all being, the oneness of all existence, the community-forming power, the process of life, the great creative force, even God, can help us develop that social understanding of ourselves that we and our culture so desperately need. It is a source of meaning to which we can dedicate our lives. These are the words of Reverend Forrest Gilmore, the executive director of Shalom Community Center in Bloomington, Indiana. Today's opening words are number 434. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Our opening hymn, 298, Wake Up Now, My Senses.
Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering
Today's transitional words are number 573. Mother's Day Proclamation. Rise then, women of this day.
Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of fears.
Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies.
Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause.
Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience.
We women of one country will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs.
From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm.
The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession.
As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel.
Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead.
Let them solemnly take counsel with each other as the means whereby the great human family can live in peace.
And each bearing after her own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God.
Julia Ward Howe. Jean Kristeller is going to help us celebrate Mother's Day.
As I thought of what this might be like this morning, actually, what I would change the word discussion to sharing in the description, but please also consider that what somebody else shares may bring you to wish to share more or to wish to share in response to that. So I invite you to do so. What I would like to start off with, though, is a reflection for yourselves, bringing to your mind the image of your mother, a word or an image or something that is related to your mother that you may indeed wish to share. Something about the connection between you and your mother that is special. And holding that sense of mindful spirit within you, again, opening your eyes. I'll invite you either to stand at where you are, to come up to the mic, or to come up to the table to show the specific of what you brought in. Use that, then take a few moments to share. I'm going to begin because as I was doing what we just did for myself yesterday, as I reflected on creating a special space here, something came to my mind, a little bit surprised, but it was what came up. You may have noticed I walked up here with something special. The word that came up from about my mother was adventure. My mother was a bit of an adventurer, and she passed that on to us, especially to me. When she was 24, she joined the American Red Cross and spent the next 6 months in Okinawa while fighting was still going on there in the hills, even though the war was ended. And then went from there on to Japan. And a number of you may know this already. leaving Japan 5 years later, married to my dad, and pregnant with me. So as I've say to people when they ask me, why do you have an interest in Japan? I say, well, I was made in Japan. But one of the things she brought back with her was this wooden doll, which is called a kokeshi. And it means, it refers to, actually this is not a child, woman, and this is not a child, this is actually a woman. But kokeshi, the first word in kokeshi is the word for child. And as some of you know, I have a rather large collection of them now, most of which I acquired. But I thought I would bring this in. And that spirit of adventure followed in our family for the rest of her life. They went back and lived in Indonesia when she was 60 with my dad, who'd gotten a job there. I went and visited them there. All of our family vacations until we got a fair amount older were camping trips. We lived in an older house, much older house, now over 300 years old, in north of Boston, with woods and fields behind us and rivers. And I was just told, we moved there when I was 4, we moved away when I just turned 9. And somewhere around age 7, I was told, well, you're a big girl now. Go and play wherever you want to. So that's part of what I mean. So I'm going to put...
So I have lots of memories with my mom, that's for sure. But one of the last memories I had with my sister Lydia was my senior pictures. And that was really extremely special because Mom got in it and so did Lydia. And I'll treasure those photographs for the rest of my life. We think of her every day, and we do honor her, and I honor my mom for Mother's Day. So, thank you.
So this thing I'm going to read you, I was reading a book called Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, and these words just popped out at me, and I loved them, so I thought I'd share them. It is a parent's job to provide shoulders for your children to sit on when they are little, so they can see the world, then stand on when they get older, so they can reach the clouds. Sometimes lean against whenever they stumble and feel unsure. They trust us, which is a crushing responsibility, because they have not yet realized we don't actually know what we're doing. So I was thinking of my mother and thinking, she has died many years ago. I wish she were here so I could run things by her and say, well, what do I do about this, Mom?
So thank you for the starter, because I think if I connect with my best memories of my mother, music. She used to sing lullabies in the most beautiful, soft voice. And that's probably where I started my love of music, which both my daughters have also continued. That's Betsy that sings for us. And that basically was coming from my mother, because unfortunately her mother, who was also very much a part of my life, couldn't sing. And one of my grandmother's favorite funny stories, my grandmother was rocking me to sleep when I was about 3, and I wanted to hear a lullaby, so I asked my grandmother to sing, thinking that she could sing like my mother. She couldn't. And I sat there, and I finally said, oh, Grandma, just rock. So as I was thinking about mothers today, and our mothers do contribute much to our lives, but we are all human and we're limited. And just as you say, your mother was an adventurer. Mine was not. But I did look to friends of mine and their mothers. Janie Alexander, who used to come to this congregation about 37 years ago. Oh my gosh. This is a woman who, when I was 9 and her daughter Diane, who brought me into this congregation, was 6. Janie got us on our bicycles and we rode 7 miles out to the Howard Johnsons through the country. And I was like, I never saw my mother on a bike, let alone take a trek like that. And so I think we're kind of a collective of not only what our mothers gave us, the best of what our mothers gave us, but also what other kids' mothers gave us. And so I like to remember that. And even later on, when I was a young woman starting to raise my family, the influence of my mother-in-law and her sister were tremendous. And I don't know what I would have done without that. Also, an aunt of mine who used to do floral paintings, much like that one on the back wall, big flowers. Not my mother's style, but my Aunt Marie was a painter and a musician. And she decorated her house with her own paintings, which I now do, but my paintings don't look like hers, they look like mine. So the artists, the musicians, the adventurers, and they don't all have to have been the same person, but I think collectively, I'm very grateful for the mothers I have known. So.
Hello, I'm Kathy. Besides having a wonderful daughter who just celebrated me, that was very nice, I had a wonderful mother, and I have a picture of her that maybe we can get brought up here. No, it isn't going to work. Okay. I thought that was going to be so cool. But it was a picture of my mom and my sisters and me on my wedding day. We're all hugging each other and having a good time. So anyway, if you ever want to see it, it's on my phone. And she just was a very wonderful person. She was very egalitarian. You know, there were 3 sisters. We were all very different. We never felt like anybody was getting better treatment than someone else, you know. That was very, and that to me was very important. She was an artist, and I guess that's where I got that. And she was an inspiration. She was a working woman when a lot of people weren't working, and I got to know her beautifulness in so many ways, and I really miss her. She's been gone 20 years now. But then I also have a mother-in-law who, you may know, it was Sylvia Alaska, and I loved her too. She was very different from my mother, but we have to remember her today too. She did so many important things for a lot of people.
Hi, I'm Doris, and this is a picture of my mother when she graduated from high school in 1929. And I grew up in a church in Fort Wayne, Anthony Wayne First Church of God, and Mother's Day was always special. And the women and the girls got corsages, or flowers. If your mother were alive, you wore a red flower. And if your mother had passed away, you got a white flower. For years, Mom and I both wore red flowers. And the day that Mom wore the white flower, I think was the saddest Mother Day we had. And I'm wearing a white flower. She's been gone 40 years now.
Well, I'm Rex. I come from a family of 11 children, actually 12. We lost one very, very early on at 3 months. So my mother spent 9 years of her life pregnant. Imagine that. I can't. But she was a little woman. She was about just slightly over 5 feet tall. But she was a dynamo. And we lived in a house without running water. Our water was a pump outside the door. I have visions today of my mother having us collect limbs and scrap wood and whatnot to build a fire to heat the wash water. And it would be heated in a number 3 wash tub. And she would scrub the clothes on a scrub board. Imagine doing that for 13 people. I can't. And her sheets were sparkling white. She boiled and she bleached, and they stayed white. They didn't get gray and dingy. She was an innovative lady. She had a demanding husband, and she had 11 demanding kids. But some way or another, she found a way to satisfy all of them. And I'm going to tell you, we had our own vernacular. words that she taught us, things that she taught us. Sunday dinners were many, many times chickens that we raised. They were free range. We would catch them on Sunday morning, and Mom would kill them and cut them up and fry them. I think it was a scheme of older people to convince children that the chicken leg was the best part of the chicken, and that way they didn't want the breast, so the adults got the breast. But anyway, with 11 kids, and we usually had either 2 or 3 chickens, there wasn't enough legs to go around. To avoid that squabble, Mom convinced us all that the thigh was a short leg. And if you ever sat down with any of my brothers and sisters and ate chicken, you would hear them talk about the short leg. And that satisfied us. She found ways to satisfy us. Doris is going to laugh at the next one. But my father was a coal miner, and he had carried his lunch in a big round bucket. Bottom part of it was water. Had a little plate to put pie. They called it a pie plate, but he never had pie in it. But one of the things that he liked to take into the mine with him was fruit cocktail. And a lot of times he wouldn't eat it, and he would bring it home, and then one of us kids would get it. Fruit cocktail in those days would only have 1 or 2 red cherries in it. Every kid wanted that red cherry. It wasn't enough to go around for 11 kids. So we were told that the grapes were white cherries. Doris and I were married when I was 26 years old, and one day she put some fruit cocktail on the table, and I said something about the white cherries. 26 years old. And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I told her. And she said, no, those aren't cherries, those are grapes. I'll tell you what, if it had been anybody but my wife, I would have probably smacked him for calling my mother a liar. But I didn't. And the very funniest part of this story is years later, we were home for Christmas one time, and we were all sitting around, and probably not all 11 of us kids, but maybe 9 of us sitting around talking. And I told that, and one of my younger brothers, Randy, sitting there, and he says, "I just now learned it." But anyway, I had quite an innovative and a resourceful mother, and she managed to raise all 11 of us and get us out of the house and get us on our way. And very fortunately, all 11 of us did quite well in life, and to date, there's still 8 of us living, so we've had a good family, thanks to my mother.
That little picture, that's me and my mom and my sister. My mom had I would have to say, a very challenging life. She is the embodiment of strength and perseverance. She grew up in a house similar to the one Rex did, no running water. The only water was a spring that ran a pipe, and it was connected to a spring, underground spring. It ran nonstop, all the time, year-round. Delicious, pure, cold water. No heat. The only heat in the house was a giant cast iron stove where you burned wood, and if you were lucky, you slept in a room near it, but otherwise you just piled on the covers. So that was a somewhat, I would call it somewhat primitive upbringing. So the first challenge that she had after she got married was my brother's traumatic brain injury, which they tried to take care of at home, coming out of the coma, but eventually he went into a persistent vegetative state, so they had to put him in a long-term care facility. So she was a caregiver for him for a while. And then next was her mother, who continued to live in that home by herself in rural Virginia after her husband died. But then she started having memory issues. So she came to live with us. I was in college at the time. And she just started going out the door and wandering around. So They knew that they could not manage her. Mom tried, but they needed to put her in a facility, so they did. And then she passed away in the facility. And then about 10 years after that, my dad developed pancreatic cancer. And my mom took care of him at home as long as she could. And then he had to go to the hospital, and it was quick, which was, I guess, a blessing. So my mom, cheers, Mom, you were a great role model for just remaining positive and carrying on. Thanks, Mom.
I brought a picture of myself when I was about a year old that was taken with my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. I was very fortunate to be able to know all of them and to live close to them. I've regretted that I live very far from my own children and grandchildren. But what I brought to share with you today was something that I wrote several years ago about my mother at a Becky Johnson retreat. And it was called The Mother I Didn't Want to Be. There were 2 pieces to my mother's life with me, or maybe 3, if I count the years after I left home. The first mother lived in Illinois, sang in the church choir, had friends, and a social life. She liked having her own house after living in various rental arrangements, and there were neighbors along the same street, some of whom which she was especially close. She loved adventures in Chicago and opportunities for her children, rides on the train, and visits to department stores, museums, zoos, and picnics in the park, usually with Dad, but sometimes with friends. We had a happy life, even though she was concerned that her oldest daughter, me, was already becoming chubby, and she wanted to spare me, some of her own unhappy battles with weight. A war ended. A president died. Costs began to escalate. Mom number 1 knew she was going to have to leave this life behind and move to another chapter in her life. Mom number 2 emerged in the rural setting of southern Indiana. Gone were her friends and opportunity for social life. Gone was the 3-bedroom home with coal furnace and inside bathroom. Gone was running water. Enter cows, chickens, pigs, coal buckets, and wood stoves. A long lane with no one living beyond her. Only fields and creek and pond, and lots of time alone. Hard enough that she didn't drive, and Dad was gone a week at a time. Hard enough that the money didn't stretch far enough, and every penny was precious for survival. She truly believed I died when I moved to Indiana. Mom 3 adapted when the 3 daughters all left the fold within a 3-year span. 2 pregnant and married, and 1 away in college. Mom 3 went to work for the first time in years. Now only the son was at home. She tried to make Indiana life work for her. She dabbled in crafts as encouraged by Dad. She loved to travel to Florida and California to get away from mother-in-law and sister, now living with them. But the poison of unhappiness had taken its toll on her. For her 45th wedding anniversary, she and Dad went to Hawaii after a grandson's wedding. They only made 1 trip back to California after that trip. She became more and more the invalid and finally died in a nursing home, cursed by Alzheimer's. It was all gone except the memories. I fought within myself to salvage the whole mother from the pieces. It's like a collage with the good and bad mixed together. Now that I'm at the age she was when she gave up, I'm determined to find that mother of early days, as well as developing appreciation for the hardships of Indiana post-Depression, post-war. My life in Indiana is very different these many years later. Ghosts of sad Sullivan still appear, but other spirits of determination and survival that kept her going also appear. And maybe that's one of the gifts of aging for me. The softening of the years, the blurring of the tears and cheers, and a choice to not give in to the weakness of the body. I know Mom gave me much, and I'm grateful to have the mix of memories, because maybe this is the reality of life, one of joys and sorrows intermingled.
Well, I really wanted to go last because I had the best mom. My mother was a role model for me. She went to work when I was in third grade, and she worked part-time so that she was always home when we came home from school. And she kept the family together. She was generally happy and included all of us in everything she did. She was frugal, and she taught me how to handle money and do good things. She was a bookkeeper and was astonished that I did not keep my checkbook to the penny. I still don't. But she was wonderful, and I owe her an awful lot.
So my mother was definitely a very human woman. She still is. She makes mistakes all the time. One of the things that I've learned from her is how to admit you've made a mistake and how to say you're sorry to your child and how important that is to respect them as a person and not just expect them to be a little you. She definitely taught me a lot of great things growing up. Like, we grew up very poor, so how to make things work when you're very poor. I use those skills today. I use those skills in the yard sale. That's where I learned a lot of that. She used to have me help out with sales that she would work for extra money. And we fought like cats and dogs because we were such different personalities when I was young. But I have to say that growing up and growing to each other has been the best experience. And I've come as a mother to understand how easy it is to make that mistake, any mistake, to, have to get that last word in a fight, or have to, say, we just can't, and that's just it. Because I know everybody's heard that from their mom. She's taught me a lot about how to be human as a mother. And also, I took a lot from my grandmothers as well. My grandma Mary, who was my mother's mom, from her I learned how to have patience. Oh my gosh. She had so much patience with me. She taught me so many board games. Every time I went to visit her, we would spend hours playing board games, even though I didn't want to sit and do board games with my grandma. And that was some of the best times of my life, and some of the memories I cherish even now, just sitting there and playing war for 3 hours. And my grandma Gladys, she was kind of my haven when my mom and I were fighting like cats and dogs. If she lived nearby, or even if she didn't live nearby, I went to live with her for a summer so that we could all get a break from each other and reset. I could always go and find that sanctuary, and she also was a very outspoken woman who did make many rough men blush with her language and her ability to not take anything disrespectful from anybody. And so if anybody wonders where I get my language from, that's who. And I know I've heard the recurring theme that not only did we take a lot from our mothers that helped shape us, and a lot from other people's mothers and other female influences in our lives that helped shape us, but as someone who's has a young child, my child is helping shape me as a mother in so many ways. I mean, I thought I had patience before I had a kid. I had nothing. Now I know I have patience. And I've also learned my limit of patience. And he's taught me that I have a bigger capacity for love than I even could ever dream of. And even though he officially made me a mother, I'm going to have to mention my sister, who's 15, because when she came into our lives, we didn't know she was going to become a permanent part of our family. She was fostered. But she taught me also how to be a mother and those first steps. And I'm learning how to be the mom of a teen right now, which is hard in and of itself. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I'm learning patience from two different sources. And that also mothers have to be there for each other. We have to have our own network of support, right? And so not only as a mother do we take from female mothers that we've known in our lives, those female roles that have influenced us as children and also our children, but we also take from our peers who help us be an example of what kind of parents we want to be just by watching them and having their support and having somebody to sound off on. Mothers are, I believe, the most important people in the world.
All right. So when we were doing the wonderful little exercise that Jean led us through, the word that I thought of was, might seem odd to some people, but it was autumn, because my mother was born September 6th, 1971. And so she was born in the early stages of autumn, the late stages of summer. And she's very much a Virgo. She's a worrywart, as most Virgos tend to be. She worries a lot, but she's very caring. And one thing that I feel connects her to autumn is she's very comforting. She's very caring. She helps calm, even though she worries a lot. But today her Mother's Day is a little bit less than ideal because over Sunday she broke her wrist, so but she's already had surgery and it's only going to be a week to heal, so things have definitely gotten more advanced since she had to care for me when I broke mine. So yep, that's my mother. She's amazing, and I have so many fond memories, even back during the recession when things were hard. She did it, so thank you.
Today's closing hymn is number 175.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing, a fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail.
live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Mary Oliver.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace. Know that you are loved and that your life is sacred.